to Adam in North Carolina. Hey, Adam, what's going on?
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Good to speak with you, Dan and Cosmic Skeptic.
For sure. How can we assist you today, my friend?
Well, it's interesting that last call kind of touched upon some topics. It's funny, I watch way too much stuff on religion, philosophy, theology, and I'm probably still a complete noob on it. But I see other people getting destroyed by some pretty loudmouth apologetic people. I don't want to mention their names and give them any more notoriety. But let's say we take a common apologetic, and I kind of want to hear your best responses to maybe someone who's called Talk Heathen a few times, called Atheist Experience a few times.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even going to say their initials because people know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So you might know.
Yeah. Rye Gran Sugenbait, right? I think that's...
No, not a proper...
okay.
Yeah, no. Same letter.
I won't even try. Twice. I won't even try to guess. I'll just keep.
Hold on, let me get a pencil.
I'm saying it in coding it out for you guys. Let's go with the argument here. I'm gonna throw the apologist to you guys right now. Okay, and you kind of touched upon this in the last call. Let's say, without any fundamental starting point, everything you say is meaningless. Everything you say, and so I'm going to use the Christian God as my fundamental starting point. What is your foundation of reality that is non-conditional? What is? You can just. I'm pretending to be.
Well, hey, my fundamental reality is Jesus. So there, I win.
Oh well, dang.
No, I'm not gonna do that. That'd be awful. This sounds like the perfect topic for Alex to cover. So I want him to go first.
Well, look, the thing to point out is that it's not an answer to turn around and say, look, my starting point is God. Okay, hold on. That's not some kind of self-evident truth. Okay, a lot of people treat it as though it's a self-evident truth. It's not the case. Now, I could say that something like induction is my self-evident truth at the basis of everything I think. And someone turns around and says, well, you can't prove induction. It's like, no, but that's a better starting point than God, because although you think that God is self-evident and it's the base starting point for your thought process, there are a lot of people who disagree with you. There is nobody on planet Earth who even has the capability of not acting in accordance with induction being true. And therefore, me choosing that as a starting point may be deductively unjustifiable, might be not something I can fully argue and defend, but it's certainly a better starting point than God, which not everybody agrees upon. So look, I start with induction and I say, I believe in induction, you believe in induction, everyone believes in induction. Could we be wrong? Sure. But there's literally no possibility of us acting in accordance with it being wrong. So if we're going to start with anything, then we should start with that. Now, maybe you're right, and you should say, well, what that means is because you can't know for certain everything is meaningless. No, it doesn't mean everything is meaningless. It means that everything might be meaningless and you have no way to determine it. So here's your options. Option A, you either choose this basis and think, so let's say, so it's either meaningless or it's not. If it's not meaningless, then you're better off choosing using this thing as the basis of your thought. You're better off choosing induction if it's not meaningless. The only other possibility is that it is meaningless. And if it is meaningless, then it doesn't make a difference whether you do or not. So it doesn't harm you at all to use it as your basis. So if it's not meaningless, you should use it as your basis. If it is meaningless, then there's no reason to choose either way. So whichever way you look at it, it's best to just throw your weight behind it and choose it. It's kind of like a Pascal's wager type argument, except it's actually worth the wager.
Yeah,
it's funny. That's exactly what I was thinking when you mentioned you should choose this. But I can see what you're saying. It's not the God of the Bible who's going to give you some consequences and you have to devote your whole life to it. This is how we can actually make sense of reality and how we can start with something that brings us knowledge. And I guess that kind of gets into it because this is the last caller was talking about epistemology, and I think this apologist is more going towards the ontological nature of knowledge. And tell me if I'm getting that wrong, but I think, would that be the way to describe this? Like, what is the ontological, like, how does knowledge exist? And then that gets to the epistemological nature of it, correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you're talking about like the meaningless thing, when you say like everything's meaningless because you can't find a basis for your thinking, that's an epistemological point. It's saying you have no way to know if what you're basing your worldview on is true. That's a fair point to make. But ontologically, it's a whole different point. You're basing the kind of appeal to nihilism on epistemology, which is a fair thing to do. You can be an epistemological nihilist, but you can't say, I know that everything is meaningless. You can only say, I can't know whether or not everything is meaningless, so it might be. And that's quite a disheartening prospect, to think that maybe everything's meaningless and I have no way to prove that it's not, but you can't prove that it is either, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because you're in the realm of epistemology.
Right. So I think you hit the nail on the head when you said you're still using induction to come to the conclusions that, God is kind of the basis for anything, right? Like you can't escape the problem of induction. And so therefore it doesn't really make sense to just shove these other kinds of premises, these other kinds of starting points, particularly if we're talking about the Christian God or even any God for that matter, because you haven't gotten to that point yet to where you can justify that. Of course, they'll always keep saying, but you don't know anything. You could be a brain in the vat. And yeah, that's all true. But that doesn't mean that I can't see certain patterns. I can't make certain observations that things aren't at least appearing to me in some kind of way. If we can at least make predictions based on the patterns that I'm seeing, even if it's all fake somehow, even if it's some virtual reality, well, am I still gaining some sort of knowledge there? If I'm able to make these kinds of predictions, if I'm able to get these some sort of results, and I would argue that I am, because there seems to be at least some rules to this thing, and maybe that's an illusion too. But I'm still being able to make actions based on information. I'm still able to act upon that. So I would say, it's kind of bunk, but it's easy to see when you hear this for the first time. I know I did. It can throw you for a loop a little bit, because it makes you doubt what you already believe, which is something that most people, I think, should do, at least at some point in their lives, but it doesn't give you the right way to build up from there. It just kind of, brings in these other kinds of, ideas that don't really mesh up too well. So
this is tricky because, induction can't be proved. And you say, Dan, there are arguments which say that when we talk about what's real, what we should really be interested in is not what's external. What's real should be what we experience. So if we experience something that's an illusion, well, that's what we're experiencing. So that is real as far as we're concerned. Sure. The problem is, you can say, I can see patterns and I can make predictions about what's going to work. Well, the problem of induction, as in fact Bertrand Russell points out in the Problems of Philosophy, says, okay, so let's try and justify induction by saying that it's worked every time up until now. The laws of nature have worked they've been proven to work. Every single time I've tried to make a prediction about the future based on gravity or something, it's worked. Well, you kind of, you back off another meta level. It's like, okay, so because the prediction has worked so far, does that mean it's going to work in 5 minutes? Well, you can't prove that.
No.
The point to make to the theist is to say, yeah, okay, induction is unjustifiable. Maybe life is totally meaningless. Maybe there's no such thing as true knowledge. But if that's true for me, it's true for you as well. Doesn't matter if you believe in a God or not. You're stuck with exactly the same epistemological problem at the basis of your thinking. I have no problem with you turning around and saying, because you can't prove what you know, you can't even define knowledge. No one can define knowledge, for a starting point. And you can turn around and say that means that your philosophy is meaningless. Okay, if you think that, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot, because it must be true of you as well. Because any reason that gets you to believe in God must be philosophical in basis. And so if induction knocks out the legs of philosophy, it also knocks out the legs of your God.
For sure.
I agree. And one thing I was going to mention, using, like you were saying, using induction as a starting point, I think it's a much better foundation than God. I was looking up a verse while basically writing down what you were saying, because I think God is a really bad starting point, because one of the things I often throw back to apologists is in 2 Thessalonians 2:11-12. It says, and for this God shall send them strong delusions, that they should believe a lie. And to me, that says that this God of the Bible that can harden your heart, that can make you believe lies, if this God does exist, it's almost one of the worst foundations we can have, because we're almost just toys in the box to this God, that it can just warp our minds anytime it wants.
Yeah, for sure. That's so interesting, because there's several verses, and you mentioned one of them in passing, almost like the hardening of hearts. You remember the story of the Old Testament with the Pharaoh? It seems that he went against what the Pharaoh's will was to do this. And again, some apologists will say, well, you have to look at the New Testament for this kind of stuff. But you mentioned
he hardens the heart of the Pharaoh and then punishes the Pharaoh for having hardened heart. Well, great job there.
Right. So, yeah. we don't know if it could be a good God. It could be a God that deceives us. Even if it is our foundation. So not a great start for anybody, right?
It's especially true within Islam as well, where they say that nothing happens and no one will believe anything unless Allah wills it. It's like if Allah wills you to believe something, then you will believe it. It's even more powerful than the Christian proposition, which is just kind of assumed. In Islam, it's explicitly stated, you won't believe anything unless Allah permits it. So if you don't believe, then that must be His will, and therefore, as you rightly point out, if He is real and we believe He's not, then He must be in some way deceiving us. And God knows literally why He would have such a motive.
Interesting stuff. Well, Adam, thanks for calling in. That was a great.
Can I throw you one last quick question?
One last quick question, Adam, real quick. Throw it at us.
Cosmic Skeptic, what is your favorite drink at the pub?
Thatcher's Gold, followed by maybe a Southern Comfort.
Have a great night, guys.
You're more than welcome.
That was funny. Just kind of fucked up. I was going to make the joke. He doesn't have a favorite drink because he's underage. At least
maybe in your silly country, but over here I've been free for nearly 2 years, and land of the free, my ass. Gee, I mean, Christ, the second time I think I ever went to the US, I went to Los Angeles and I gave a talk. I was speaking at a conference, and I thought, this is great. I'm in a suit. I'm merging with speakers who are like in their 30s. I'll pass in the bar really easily. Like they're not going to think that I'm, as a speaker, that I'm underage. And then after I give the talk and people are applauding, and the host gets up and goes, that guy is 19 years old. And everyone's like, oh, and I'm like, oh, why did you bloody say that? Luckily, the bar staff was slightly out of earshot, so I managed it. That means I have broken the law every single time I've been to the United States. And
I want to point out, last time you were here in the United States with me, you did happen to wrangle yourself a beverage containing alcohol, and I don't know how you did it. I don't know how that conversation...
Not only did I manage to wrangle a alcoholic beverage, I managed to get an alcoholic beverage that was named after me in the After Party for Faithless Forum. What was it called? The Cosmo Skeptic, I think, was the name of the thing. And I thought, I'll be damned if I'm going to fly all the way to Texas and have a drink named after me and not be able to taste it.
Yeah, that was it was really awesome that somebody had kind of put that together. They were the one for mine. It didn't end up getting used, but they had one for mine. It was called the Truth Serum. And I thought that name was so good, but it ended up not being on the menu, unfortunately. But yeah, alcohol, good stuff.